If everyone would stand, we'll call this city council meeting to order. First, if we'll have a word of silence. Thank you. We'll ask Ms. Conway if she would lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. I want to welcome each of you all here to the September the 9th, 2024 Georgetown City Council meeting. This is a meeting to conduct business for the city of Georgetown. We're asking you again to remember and remind you of a decorum that we expect that you will adhere to. We will follow the agenda at this time. Madam Clerk, if you will call the roll.
Here.
Here.
Mrs. Butcher Conway.
Here.
Mrs. Hamburg.
Present.
Mr. Hampton.
Here.
Mr. Showalter.
Here.
Mr. Stone.
Here.
Mrs. Tackett.
Here.
Thank you. You have received the minutes from last meeting. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes as written?
Motion, Mayor.
Motion made by Ms. Tackett.
Second, Mayor.
Second made by Mr. Allen. Are there further questions and or comments? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say likewise. You should have received through the packet the receipt of check register. If you have received that, council members, please raise your hand. Thank you. Let the record reflect that all received it. At this time, I will bring up Chief Tim Thompson and the Georgetown Fire Department promotional pennies. Chief Thompson.
Mayor, Council, CAO Golden, just want to thank you again for this opportunity. Like I mentioned last council meeting, we've had a lot of promotions because of the retirements that we've had over the last couple of weeks. Just, again, grateful for this opportunity. This is an exciting time for our department. We had some great leadership leave, but we have some great leaders that are stepping into these spots as well. So without further ado, I would like to go on and get started. We have Fire Marshal Ann Willett. Come forward, please. She has been with our department for 19 years. She was a captain for quite some time, and her husband, who is a captain at Frankfort Fire Department, is going to pin her, Andrew. Battalion Chief Chad Heisel. Chad's been with our department for 18 years. He also works for Scott County Fire Department full-time. He's a busy man, and we're very grateful for him. He was a captain for quite some time as well. His wife, Rachel, is going to pin him. Battalion Chief Kevin Cummins was promoted up from captain. He's been with our department for 20 years, and his wife Megan is going to do the honors of pinning him. And family. Tyler Flint was just promoted to captain. He's been with our department for 9 years, and his wife Jackie is going to pin him. Next, we have Cam Collins. He was just promoted from engineer to captain. He's going to be pinned by his mother, Lori. Next, we have Derek Jarvis. He was just promoted to captain. He's been with our department for 9 years. His wife, Brooklyn, is going to pin him, and it's also their first wedding anniversary. Derek's dad, Scott's right here. He retired from the Georgetown Fire Department. He was our fire marshal. Very instrumental in my career. We did have one more gentleman, Captain Scott Markey. He is actually home with a sick wife right now. He wanted to just send his wishes to everybody that's here. I did want to give him a shout out. Him and Billy Calvert. We just had the Toys for Tots chili cook-off, and they raised just shy of $12,000.
Oh, wow.
Very proud of the men and women that work for our department. Thank you guys, and thank you all.
And thank you, Chief Thompson. Again, congratulations to all those that have been promoted. At this time, we have public comments. A reminder on public comments, you need to come to the podium, state your name, and then also a reminder that you will have 4 minutes to state your business before this council. Please be mindful of those 4 minutes. Madam Clerk will time you. When it gets to 1 minute, she will let you know. And then at that time, when the 4 minutes is up, she will tell you time's up. And we will ask that you please at that time take your seat and be respectful as we continue on with the agenda. At this time, we have Dan Holman. We want to talk about tax structure.
Hi, I'm Dan Holman from Georgetown. So yes, regarding this Wiles Farm, regarding this regional project and regarding the Wiles Farm property that we've all been talking about for a long time. And so I guess, you know, there's this land that's for sale for the first time in a long time. And the city and the county the county has an option to buy it, which is frankly probably not a bad idea because it's just a valuable piece of land. It's a big contiguous piece of land that we could do something with. So there's lots of different options about what to do with it. At the last steering committee meeting, Joe Kane specified, he said, like, you could do anything with this land. It could be used for any purpose. So there's obviously this group, and a lot of them are not from here. They're from Madison County and Lexington. So these people are working on a plan of what to do with it, which is a regional business park. There's also, we could sell it to a horse farm. That seems to be an option on the table. Also, we could develop it into needed park space, which is, if you look at our data and our numbers of Parks and Recreation Master Plan, you look at our own acreage, like there's a lot of data to support that we need quasi-public land in Georgetown, which includes park space, which includes other public buildings, such as you see over at Scott County Park. So the question of what to do with it really should still be on the table, and we really should have more than one option, because in the end, voting on only one option is not really giving a choice. There should be two or more options for people to decide about. So regarding one driver of this whole thing is the tax structure of the way taxes work in our region. And I didn't know about this, and I think other people haven't known about this. It's just an interesting thing. And when I met with Reagan Taylor, I didn't even ask him about it, but he volunteered that this was a driver of why he's pursuing this. So we should all just make sure that everybody knows this if you didn't know it. So in Madison County and other counties surrounding here, the county government does not take business taxes inside the city. In Scott County, we do. So the Madison County Fiscal Court does not collect business taxes from inside the city of Richmond. So therefore, Richmond doesn't have a great incentive to share things with Madison County. They'd rather do their own business development and take the full tax money from it, which they're doing. And they're kind of wavering on this whole regional project even. But so we kind of got a special rule passed through. So the Scott County Fiscal Court collects business taxes from inside the city of Georgetown, unlike all the surrounding counties. And so that's one reason why explains why the Scott County Fiscal Court is so interested in what happens in Georgetown, because they get everything that we get. And basically this results in, if we were like all the other counties, this is like $19 million a year that would be coming to Georgetown. That if this 2002 rule hadn't been passed, or in the 2002 rule, it allows the fiscal court to give credit to the, 2 minutes?
3 minutes.
Okay.
Yep,
So we would be getting $19 million more a year if we were like everybody else, and that would pay for stormwater. That would pay for all the things that we don't know how to pay for. So regarding that, just something everybody should know about and research and understand. We should all understand that. Then just regarding the finances of this is not a good financial deal. Basically, we are selling our tax base to another county. And that subverts democracy because they are taxing us, taking taxes from our community, but we cannot vote for them. It's almost like taxation without representation. Madison County will be owning a share of property, and they will collect taxes and give us like 10% and 3%. Basically, only we get 7%. And the shipping away. So that's just something that we should all be concerned about. It's not a good financial deal. Regarding the KPDI, we're basically not even getting KPDI money. We're only getting $500,000 from KPDI for this project.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Holman. Next, I have Caitlin Tudor, Regional Industrial Park.
Good evening. My name is Caitlin Tudor, if you don't remember me. My friend Erin is not here tonight. She's a powerhouse. I miss her dramatically, but she can't be here. So, in her absence, I want to remind everybody that there is a very, very, very large consensus among your citizens that the regional industrial park is not a good idea, mainly because the amount of money that is required to put into this project by the city of Georgetown and Scott County, as well as the other entities that are involved, does not, the numbers don't add up. The revenue that is projected to supposedly come back to us, the return on investment, the initial out-of-pocket expense that is going to be required to put this into motion, the numbers do not add up. The money that we have to put in is not the money that's going to come back to our community. Dan's right. If we have to share what is going to be coming out monetarily from this project, then we should have a say on where that money goes. In this project, we do not. Yet we are responsible for all aspects of this to get it up and running. To me, that doesn't make good sense. That's not a good business plan. That's not a good business projection. It's just not good numbers. Aside from that, the citizens are telling you no. The citizens are saying, we don't agree with this. We don't like this. We don't want this. However, again, Dan is right. We need green space. Our park structures are horrible, flat horrible. Our kids don't have enough good playground space. Our families don't have enough good quality outdoor space to do good quality outdoor activities. I was in Greenville, South Carolina all of last week. I have family down there. We go down there frequently. not a fourth of a mile up the road from my brother's house, is Heritage Park. It is incredibly beautiful. It has a huge amphitheater, it has beautiful playgrounds, it has adequate walking trails, it has ballparks, it has a train that goes around it. They do lots of festivals there, they do music festivals there. Why can't we do something like that? Why can't we utilize that space for a productive manner? Because my understanding is the job projection is only like 1,000 or a little bit more. That's not a good balance, in my opinion. And a lot of people, I'm pretty sure, are in agreement that the numbers and what is expected doesn't balance with what we're expected to put into this project. My next point is there's been a lot of stuff thrown at City Council and the mayor, a lot of concerns over the last several months on a lot of different topics. What is being done to get back to the citizens to give those updates? I know there's been a website update. I know the mayor gives comments, but to me, that doesn't seem like that's enough information. There's a lot of questions that are posed in City Council public comments. I want to know what's coming back to the citizens. I want to know how that communication is actually taking place in a good, structured, productive manner. Like I said, other cities have incredible outdoor space for their citizens. We don't have adequate pools. We don't have an adequate YMCA type setup. We don't have adequate parks. We don't have adequate daycare. We don't have adequate after-school programs. How in the world are we supposed to envision continued growth, supposedly structured, planned growth, when we don't have the stuff to support what you're wanting to do? Can we please take a look at that a little more in depth before you make this huge decision? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much. And, excuse me, speaking of that, I want to follow the agenda, some update on the regional economic development. From the last meeting that we had on the 26th of August, we are at the point now that we're finalizing the interlocal agreement, and this is the agreement with all the partners of this regional authority. Our next step is to get this information once it's presented and get this out to council as well as the fiscal court for you all to view. After you all view that, you can ask questions and so on that you may want to have. And then the next step is for us to, when we're starting this process, is to set up a work session with fiscal court and also city council. And during this work session, a presentation will be given and you will be able to ask questions about this regional project. Also, we are getting some of the other participants of this regional project from Madison, Richmond, Berea to come. And also, we're trying to get, once we get the date finalized, to hopefully get Senator Knoll or somebody from his staff to come and talk about the regional concept, what it is. And that is where we are heading. And our goal is to get you information on this project, to get you to be able to answer questions so that you have this information so that when we bring this back for your approval for this economic development interlocal agreement, you will have the information you will need. So that's what's going on, but hopefully we'll have this meeting set up by the end of this month. We'll have that. We have some dates in mind, we'll get those to you all. So that's where we stand at that point in time. Secretary Knoll. Or somebody from his staff.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? All right, next. In the last meeting, there were some constituents who talked about the Derby states and also school traffic concerns. And these are two different items that we're dealing with. We are continuing our talks with both the school and also with the state, and also on some concerns that these people are having and some possible solutions or recommendations they could do that. So we are going to continue that process with them and see what we get worked out. Now, with the Derby Estates, their issues are same issues that we have in other parts of the city, which is speeding, which is people not obeying the traffic laws. You know, we have our traffic unit out, and they've been doing a really good job of actually, when they see or observe moving violations or laws being broken, they have been given citations, even up to one out towards on Long Lake Pike. And speaking of that, we have talked with the state. They are going to have the flashing lights. They're going to take care of that, and they will install those. So as soon as they get those in, that we will have that. But with Derby Estates, I am going to meet with one of the constituents of there, Ms. Catron, and I'm going to meet along with a couple other people from my staff, and they're going to, just give us some ideas of what their concerns are. And I've also been talking with some others in this city about some other areas of concerns. One in my neighborhood, exactly. I don't have sidewalks, and there's people speed up and down there all the time. So we're trying to do the best we can to come up with some, we call some calming mechanisms. We did, this council passed where we did a traffic study. And from that traffic study, there are some ideas or some recommendations that we could use. So we're going to be exploring those, and we're going to be talking to some of these citizens about that and trying to do the best we can to see what will work among that. Next, the update for the name change for Ed Davis. I want to give you a little bit of a historical background, what I didn't do last time. How we got to this point here. There were a couple of concerned citizens that want to go back to their heritage of actually in an area of town, which is the Boston area of Georgetown, to kind of unify their group. These two citizens went to Scott County Parks and Rec, and they wanted to know what is the process of actually being able to change the name. From this, when they started, Drew Beckett, who is the director for Parks and Rec, started the process of looking into that. Also, they have had meetings. Some was over in Ed Davis, and they had a forum. And from this forum, they came up with 4, I think, names that this community wanted to bring for a name change. And this name change, from that, they they had an opportunity to do a vote. And also a petition went around, was signed, and they brought all this information to their last Parks and Rec meeting. And when Parks and Rec gave each person who wanted to speak some time to speak their concerns, and at that point in time, the Georgetown Scott County Parks and Rec chose not to table it, because one issue is this. I did some research, and I had my staff do research. There is no process that we can find that actually tells us how parks are named. So the first thing you got to do, you got to have a process and a procedure in place. So, in conversation with Mr. Beckett, he is going to draft up a policy and procedures that he's going to take back to his board of Parks and Rec. And they will then do the legwork of working with that. And once they get that established, hopefully it will be where no matter it will be Georgetown Parks or anything in the county, when they're going to have a name change or anything different than the original name on it, there is going to be a process which they have to follow. And so that's what they're working on. And I want to thank Mr. Beckett for starting that process, and we will give you updates once that gets back up. So that's where we are on this. So we are addressing that. Also, I believe that Councilman Hambrick brought up talking about as to, we did a resolution as to what of the, the resolution on revenue for the collecting of funds from the Scott County Revenue Commission. We are still working with that. And in my fact, in my talks with Mr. Hall, he's going to hopefully get some information. But it's quantified that, there are some measures they've done, and I'm going to hope to get that back to you all once we get that all, to answer that for you. But I am working on that to get that addressed for you, and we'll hope to get that back to council as soon as possible. Mr. Allen, I think in the last meeting, you wanted to know about the abatement, opioid abatement fund and so on. So I'm going to let Chief Administrative Officer Devin Golden talk a little bit about that, because she's been working with that.
So, Councilman Allen, correct me if I miss anything, but I believe your request was how much is the city of Georgetown due over the life of the settlement agreements? How much have we received so far, and what are we spending that funding on? I'm still working on getting the total amounts. That they're over a 10-year period. Actually, some of them are even more years, and they kind of all pay out differently. Some pay a chunk of years at a time. Some pay one at a time. So I'll have the total hopefully next meeting. But to date, we have received $235,000 and change through the 3 settlements. I know you all keep hearing just in aggregate them referred to as the settlements. There's the distributors settlement, there's the manufacturers, and all signs point to that there are going to continue to be additional parties who are ending in these settlement agreements and paying out local governments for the impact that opioids have made on their communities. So I will work on that total, but to date we've received, like I said, $235,000 and change. You'll note if you were at the State of the County address today, the county has received I think just shy of $500,000 to date from those settlements. The equations that they use to determine, take in a number of factors, and obviously the county population is larger than the cities, and if the entire population is included, I think that's why those numbers are reflected. So I think we're projected to receive just about half of what they're receiving on the total, but I will have that soon. With fiscal years 24 and 25 budgeting for Corey Council's salary as our recovery support coordinator, we have about $65,000 remaining. These numbers are effective as of August 28th. I actually received an email today that we got another deposit of $9,000, so I guess you can make that almost $75,000 to date. The net recovery device presentation that the council heard, we did request a proposal for that, and the cost is $5,500 per participant. They typically do 10 to 20 participants, but they're willing to do 5 participants if that's more in budget. So we're working on reviewing that agreement, and if there's interest, it seems like the council was very interested in that presentation and in the treatment there and in the science. So if there's interest in that, we can work through that agreement to use some of the funds that way. There would be a chance that we would have to supplement Corey's salary with general fund revenues at some point, depending on how the settlement money comes in. But like I said, it seems like the council was potentially interested in the opportunity to fund the net recovery device. So that's the update on those numbers, but more to come there.
Thank you. Next, the demolition for the green building. I believe they're continuing this week, so they'll start. What they've done so far, they kind of shored up a few things and put some stop barriers up, so when they start taking it down, that they have, so that some of the debris and water runoff can be collected at that time. But I'll keep you updated on that. The Farmers Market Pavilion construction is still ongoing. An estimated date of completion is November. The steel has arrived for the pavilion, and once the steel gets here, they're going to be able to now start putting it up, and you may see it as you pass along Washington Street or Broadway. You should be able to see some of the actual structure going up. Update on Lemons Mill Bridge construction, which has been out for a while. The major structural beams are installed. Construction is on track to be completed, and opening date is somewhere late November, early December. And if you did not go to the Festival of the Horse, you missed a big event. It was widely attended. We had a really big parade on Friday night. I was involved both Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday. And Thursday night, I was one of the judges for the chili cook-off. And, you know, so, but my hat's off to, first of all, the fire department, who worked diligently in EMS, our police, who during the parades patrolled to keep people back away from the barriers that they had set up. And they also spent a lot of time showing their faces, and probably by their presence, probably kept a lot of mischief from happening. And you couldn't go very many spots without seeing a police officer there. And I want to tell them that, to how much appreciated that's needed, and also to assure that this festival of horse will go without any issues, and people will feel safe. And last but not least, tourism, and Lori Sanders, that's a big job. She's probably right now sitting down and probably trying to recover from all this. It takes a lot of planning and making sure everything goes with a hitch. Even when the rain came Friday night, people were still there. And people were commenting on some of the social medias that, you know what, even when it rained, you know, we still had a great time. The parade went on. So that's a big plus for her. And again, Robert Bruin and Public Works, these people were there from dark to dark, setting up, picking up, and making sure that this festival went without a hitch. And from all the indications that I received from talking with all those involved, it was a big success. And this is a big deal. And people coming in from all over, from California, there was a couple of people I met when walking downtown from Canada. And, you know, and we asked them, you know, why Georgetown? And their comment to me, which makes me feel good, and should make this council feel good, about when people come in, and the first thing they say about Georgetown is, number one, your city looks beautiful from downtown. And not only that, the driving point they mention is the people. They felt invited, and they felt warm, and they felt that they were welcome to be here. And that is, like I said, when you're the 40th in the country for being named for a great place for people to live and retire from and all that, that means that this community is doing the right things. And I just want to make a shout out to them because sometimes we often forget to give these people their due praises. My mom and dad used to say, give people roses while they're still alive.
Right.
And that's what you do. So we want to do that, and again, they've done a great job. That being said, let's move on to our next item. We have council committee reports. I don't believe we had any for this month that we need to address. GMWSS, and we got A. Lane Christian Company for $20,327.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sean Darrington. I'll be presenting on behalf of Chase, who's at the Water Professionals Conference. GMWSS has 4 purchase orders for review this evening. So would you care to consider each individually or as a group? Individually? Individually. All right. The first purchase order, as you mentioned, Elaine Christensen for $20,327. This is to repair the high service pump 2 motor at the water treatment plant. This is a budgeted maintenance project at $28,000, and this pump provides water to the distribution system.
Motion made by Mr. Allen, second made by Ms. Conway. Are there further questions and or comments? All in favor of the motion of Lane Christian Company for the amount of $20,327 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say likewise. Let the record reflect that the motion passed. Next, item B, Kentucky Engineering Group for $111,120.
This is for the wastewater treatment plant number 2, tertiary filter upgrade and mechanical bar screen replacement. This is a budgeted project of $1.9 million to modify the 2 remaining sand filter basins to accept the installation of 4 new Aquadisc cloth media filters and for the replacement of the existing mechanical bar screen. This is the low bid for professional engineering services related to design, preparation, and bidding of this project.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion made by Ms. Brent. Do I have a second? Second. Second made by Mr. Hampton. Are there further questions and or comments? All those in favor of the motion, Kentucky Engineering Group for $111,120, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say likewise. Let the record reflect that the motion passed. Next, item C, Herrick Company Incorporated for $95,000.
This is for wastewater treatment plant number 2's Pistagrit paddle drive replacement. This is a budgeted project, and Herrick was the low bidder. Although it is above the budget, TMMK has provided approval for the overage.
Motion, Mayor.
Okay, motion made by Ms. Tackett. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second made by Ms. Hambrick. Are there further questions and or comments?
Yeah, a question on this one. TMMK is putting in 20,000, is that correct?
Yes.
So, okay, so it's 75,000 coming out of this, and with TMMK's 20,000, correct?
They actually, it's actually a pass-through as a Toyota project.
Okay.
Any further questions and or comments? All those in favor of the motion, Herrick Company Incorporated for $95,000, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say likewise. Let the record reflect that the motion passed. Last item, Hazen and Sawyer for $125,000.
This is for water distribution modeling services. Currently, Hazen is our sanitary sewer hydraulic modeling consultant. They built and run our sewer model. We intend to develop a hydraulic model of our water network as well. As part of our line item grant through the Kentucky General Assembly, we received $125,000 for this effort. Normally, we bid the engineering work. However, in an effort to streamline our hydraulic analysis work, especially related to new development, it provides efficiency for us to have a single consultant for modeling on both sewer and water. So we negotiated this work for this task order with Hazen. This is permissible under state procurement law and okay with KIA, who administers the funding. In-house, GMWSS has already developed a hydraulic model of our water system. We're requesting approval of this task order in the amount of $39,240 for the testing and the calibration of our model. The PO is for $125,000, and that's to encumber the full amount of the grant and to go toward future modeling task orders. The $39,000 is part of the $125,000 funding.
Do I have a motion?
Motion, Mayor.
Motion is made by Mr. Allen. Do I have a second? Second made by Mr. Hampton. Are there further questions and or comments?
I have a comment or a question. So, this is kind of a confusing thing. You've already got the hydraulic modeling,
Correct.
and $39,000 is already embedded in the $125,000, but it's a grant for $125,000. Is that correct?
Right. So the $39,000, we're asking approval as that first step, the first draw on that line item.
Okay, and is this going to be, some of this going to be a recurring expense after the grant is done?
The way it will eventually work once we have the model built, the way that it does with the sewer model is when there's new development, as part of that approval process, The water and the sewer will be modeled to see how that affects the system. And so part of this is we've got the model, but we need to test it and calibrate it. And then we would retain Hazen to provide that water modeling service going forward. And that is a pass-through to the developer at that time of approval.
Okay, so it will in the future then cost money to continue to calibrate
Yes.
beyond the grant? Okay.
But so what you're saying is, so even though it's gonna be a reoccurring, again, debt, that is passed on really to the developer to pay, is that correct?
Right, and that's
Okay.
a modest amount.
Okay.
You know, I don't know the number, but a few $100s, a few thousand, whatever, it's not 39,000 each
Okay.
time it needs to be used.
Okay.
Thank you.
And to clarify, the 125,000 is the item that really comes to the council. Task orders under that approved amount will get approved by the board, but the actual purchase order for 125,000 is the transaction for the council. The task orders don't ever come back to you all because you've already approved the underlying project.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, are there further questions and/or comments? Motion is made, properly second. No other question or comments? All those in favor of Hazen and Sawyer for $125,000 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say likewise. Let the record reflect that the motion passed. Next, item 10, Chief Administrative Officer. First is the special events ordinance discussion. And from that,
Mayor, do you mind if, since we've got the property owners for items C and D, do you mind if we kick down to those items on the agenda?
Okay. All right, so we need to,
Respect for their time.
okay, so we're going to switch up a little bit. So is that the first reading that we're talking about?
Yes,
Okay.
first reading of the annexation
All right,
ordinance.
so we're going to kind of switch gears here, and we're going to go to item C. And this is the first reading of the annexation ordinance. The property is 1432 Paynes Depot Road. Sponsors are Sandra Wilkins Brent and Willow Hambrick.
An ordinance annexing into the city of Georgetown certain real property containing approximately 2.93 plus or minus acres located at or around 1432 Payne Depot Road in Scott County, Kentucky. Summary. 1. Annex into Georgetown city limits by written consent of the property owner in accordance with KRS 81A.
412, approximately 2.93 plus or minus acres of property located at or around 432 Paynes Depot Road in Scott County, Kentucky. 2, provides for repeal of inconsistent laws, severability of provisions, and an effective date upon passage and publication. The full text of this ordinance is available for examination in the city clerk's office, 629 North Broadway, Georgetown, Kentucky, 40324, or at www.georgetownky.gov. Publicly introduced and read for the first time September 9th, 2024.
Okay.
So this is an annexation that is a condition of a zone change application that was approved by the planning commission. That'll be item D, but as mentioned in the ordinance, the annexation is approved under consent of the property owner, and it is just occurring in order to satisfy the zone change conditions. So I know that the property owners are here. If anybody has questions as we go through the next ordinance also, and also Elise from the planning commission is here if there are questions about how the hearing was at the planning commission level and how that approval went.
I do have a question.
Sorry, just to be clear, is your question about the annex or the zone change?
Yes, because the planning commission, from what I read in the documents, and if it's out of order, just let me know. The planning and zoning approved it, the zoning change, despite the fact that it was not originally part of the new.
Zone change.
The zone change.
Okay. Go ahead and do first read of the zone change unless anybody has an annexation question, and then I know Elise can approach and
Okay,
address those.
yeah,
Yeah, so we'll do that, and then we'll go to that, and then I'll bring Elise up, and she can
okay, that'd be
answer
great.
questions, okay? Item D, first reading for the zone change ordinance, 1432 Paynes Depot Road. Sponsors are Sandra Wilkins Brent and Willow Hambrick.
An ordinance changing the zoning classification of certain real property containing approximately 2.93 plus or minus acres located at 1432 Paynes Depot Road, Georgetown, Scott County, Kentucky, from A1 to B5. Summary: 1. Rezones approximately 2.93 plus or minus acres located at 1432 Paynes Depot Road, Georgetown, Scott County, Kentucky, from A1 to B5. 2. Provides for repeal of inconsistent laws, severability of provisions, and an effective date upon passage and publication. The full text of this ordinance is available for examination in the City Clerk's Office, 629 North Broadway, Georgetown, Kentucky, 40324, or at www.georgetownky.gov. Publicly introduced and read for the first time September 9th, 2024.
All right. At this time, Elise, she's from Planning and Zoning, so if you would come up, please, and you can explain the process. I think maybe hopefully you'll be able to answer Councilman Hambrick's
Just to
question.
clarify, it didn't seem like the comprehensive plan included this originally, but yet Planning and Zoning went ahead and approved it. So just a bit about the reasoning for that.
So in KRS 100, which is the guiding document for planning and zoning, they do have the specific outlining provisions. The first of which is that it aligns with the comprehensive plan, and in the absence of which the board can make findings whether or not there's changes to the character of the area that weren't considered, or if there's changes of an economic, social nature which makes the current zone invalid. So with the property rezoning to the south and east, that's something that we were aware of, but it wasn't really something that was super considered as part of the comprehensive plan process. And staff recommended an approval based off of the statute that there were changes that were not considered, and the board ultimately recommended approval of the zone change amendment because of that condition and that provision of state statute. So it's from the changes not otherwise considered that kind of see that with the development of that property with the distillery to the south and the annexation in, that had kind of triggered that part of things, and that's where the recommendation had come from.
Okay.
All right. Is there any other questions? Thank you, Elise.
Of course.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, we're going to go back up here to item A, which is the special events ordinance. And I'm going to bring City Attorney Emily Bertram up, and I'm going to let her talk about that. And after she goes over this, the idea is to stimulate a discussion. So let's, discuss, because there are some important items that we need to consider when putting this events package together. So, Emily, thank you.
Yep, all right, good evening. So the purpose of this tonight is to just have a discussion about the special events ordinance, as the mayor stated. This is a topic that, I'm jumping ahead of myself, but this is a topic that has been talked about in the police committee, and at the last council meeting, Councilmember Hambrick asked for an update. So put together this presentation just to talk about kind of the reason why a special events ordinance is being talked about, kind of the current process, the current requirements for special events here in Georgetown, the proposed process and requirements that have been discussed at the police committee, other amendments that might come into play with our code of ordinances, and then just kind of outlining next steps so that everybody just kind of has a clear picture of the path we can take for this. I want to be clear that this ordinance that we're talking about has not been put in motion at all. It still will require 2 readings to become law, and there will be no impact on any of the events that have already been approved for this year. So just a caveat there. All right, so what is a special events ordinance? It's a set of rules and regulations that govern the organization and approval of events that use or impact city-owned property or the public right-of-way, or events that request city services. So this means that generally we're talking about events on city property, but sometimes there are events on private property that impact the community at large and just require a little bit more attention. The primary purpose is to provide a process for the event organizers to coordinate with the city and to ensure that safe and orderly measures are in place. It just adds to and protects the quality of life for your residents, the business owners that may be impacted by events, as well as the visitors that are coming in to participate in the events. So at the bottom, you'll kind of see the departments or the divisions, or at least the parts of the city that are involved in this process. So the Office of the City Clerk, that's kind of your intake point. This is currently how it works. The Police Department, they are pulled in for traffic and safety measures. Public Works, they work with us to kind of make sure that we have cleanup efforts. A lot of the equipment that vendors or that the event organizers will need help kind of produce that and organize that. And then most importantly, you all as the City Council, as the body that approves the applications. Next slide. So why is a special events ordinance needed? So generally, they ensure the public safety and welfare. These are things like traffic and crowd control, noise, sanitation, scheduling, cost recovery, and even just communication in the community. It's also needed just to clarify the process and essentially what you as an applicant must meet in order to have that privilege to put on your event on city property in our community, as well as the options on where you may be able to have your event. More specifically, and this is kind of the background of how we got here, there is a need to relieve congestion and road closures that affect downtown Georgetown. This is something that several of you all have discussed in recent months. There's also a need to develop better communication throughout neighborhoods. So not only with the community at large about the event marketing, but also with the business owners or the private property owners that are going to be impacted by events that are being put on around them. And then finally, to just improve our application review and approval process, not only at a staff level, but for you all as the elected officials who approve the request. We've had a couple of applications recently where there's just been some questions on have all the components been met, what do we do, that sort of thing. So the goal is that's just kind of outlining generally why this type of ordinance is good, but more specifically some of the pressure points that we're trying to respond to and relieve here in the community. Any questions on that so far? No? Okay, next slide. So currently the application process is pretty short and sweet. You can't really see, but I took a screenshot of the application that's on our website. Essentially, if you want to host a special event, you submit the application, the city clerk reviews and vets that application, and then as part of your council packet, it is submitted to you all for consideration. The clerk's office does try to flag any missing components, but that is presented to you all. You ask your questions, you take the vote, and it's approved. Sometimes, and just talking about the need to improve the process, this is kind of where we have some weak points, I would say, that we can improve in the sense of if there's conditions we want to put on the property, if there's confusion about like which location is best versus a different location in town, times of day that they can start to set up, that sort of thing. We don't really have anything right now that drives the answers to those questions. Any questions on the current process?
I have some questions. So Tracy, would it be possible for you to, either now or at the end of the presentation, to say what would be most helpful to change in the current application process from your end? You could do that now, or when would it be best for her to speak to that?
Well, probably would be, I don't know if it would be good for just get that question and maybe bring it to council later, or when she figures out.
I can email you guys.
Yeah, she can email that probably to you, probably be the best way to do that.
Okay. Because I think your input is integral to what we eventually think is best as far as cleaning this up and making it proscriptive and descriptive, so.
All right.
Write that down.
Any other questions on the current process? No? Okay. Next slide. Okay, so this is like definitely a high-level overview. I didn't want to overwhelm you, but this is the component where we're hoping to have the most discussion tonight. So in the police committee, we have talked generally about what are the different things that we could bring to this process to improve it. A lot of this is based off how other cities across the state handle special events. So I did kind of survey other cities similar to Georgetown, whether, even larger cities, smaller cities, and there are several consistent components of their processes that we're at least have discussed bringing into this proposed ordinance. And several of these are set forth here. So generally from a process standpoint, what we're looking at is improving the permit application. So currently, like I said, there's that online form, and there are questions about who are you, who's your point, what are the dates, times, all that kind of thing. Basically, the goal would be to improve what type of content we would want to capture in that permit application, to make sure that we really have a better understanding of the event, really the impact, and also what types of communication they've had with city staff across the board, but also looking at their plans to communicate with the public, that sort of thing. With this, special events and the services that go into putting on these events, the city is able to impose a permit fee to help recover the cost of essentially administering the special event program. The dollar amount that's been proposed by the city clerk's office, I believe, is $50. That is based on her and her staff's experience with just like the time it takes to go through all this, the steps of vetting the application, the follow-up, the communication with other staff, and that sort of thing. That's a dollar figure that does need to remain balanced with the time and effort that we as city staff are putting into this process. It can't be used as a revenue generation tool, so just keep that in mind. Permit conditions. This is something that we have discussed imposing. So someone comes up here, they apply to you. Maybe there's something about their event that there's a condition that needs to be imposed. So if it's kind of in a high density area, maybe it's closer to residential neighborhoods, you may want to consider imposing some type of condition about noise. So maybe if they're going to have a live band, outdoor music has to cease at 10 p.m. Things like that to help just regulate the nuisance components that events can create for the neighboring properties. Those conditions are not something that are currently written in place. It's more just based on conversation. This would help improve not only what types of conditions you might impose on events, but also what that follow-up process looks like, so that the event applicant is clear that here are the conditions that have been imposed on your event. They must agree to those, and then if they do violate those conditions, that can, I guess, be used, unfortunately, against them in future events if they're not following the rules, if that makes sense. Other components, just from a process standpoint, I guess I'm going to skip enforcement. I'll jump to appeals. We're looking at an appeals process, perhaps. If someone does apply and their application is denied, you would want to give them their due process. You would want to give them the ability to have you all as the council hear that again, see if they can take another stab at getting that permit. That's really, like I said, the high level reason for that. It's just a little bit more fair of an administrative process in that sense. And then the enforcement, this is really just adding the tools that we as the city could use to make sure that people are, one, following the conditions, following the permit, respecting the permit that's issued to them, and just provides clear direction to staff on how they can interact with events and participant goers, just to make sure that the event is good for everybody and does essentially jive with our regulations. So that's kind of just generally the process that we're looking at. So it's still the same. They fill out the application, addition of perhaps paying an application fee, having that application be vetted, coming to you all for approval. You could impose conditions, you may not. Enforcement is essentially the same as it is now. And then the extra layer, if someone's event application is denied, or if it gets revoked, let's say they're in the middle of an event and something happens and that permit gets pulled, just providing them an opportunity to appeal that decision. Any questions on the general process?
Yeah, quick question. Is there like a reflection of the event? As an example, if somebody said that they're going to disassemble at 8 o'clock p.m., but they don't actually start until like 8:30 or 8:45, mm-hmm. Is there anybody that kind of monitors some of that so that we can get feedback so that in the future, if they come back again and ask for something, we can do a check, say, your event didn't end at the appropriate time, so make sure that you do it this time?
So that
is that covered already?
That would be part of the enforcement component. Okay. And I think typically, because if you're thinking of feet on the ground during this event, most often it's going to be the police department or Public Works, who are the first to know about that and would enforce that component.
I have a question.
Yep.
Is the $50 fee what we already charge?
We don't charge, I don't think, for
Okay.
we don't charge an application fee right now for
Okay.
any of these events. So
Good
that
to
would
know.
be a new component.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
And I know that tourism has had input in this already, or
I don't-
Lori Saunders?
I don't,
No?
no, tourism's not been consulted yet.
Okay, I know she addressed the council about some of these things earlier, and might be good to have some of her input going forward as far as what she thinks has worked well and what she thinks could be. I know she gave an opinion, I guess is what you would call it, that we try to limit things outside of city-sponsored events to one event per month. And I can't remember exactly what her opinion was on how early setup she thought should be, but I think she did maybe say something about that as well. Because some of the complaints I'm getting are, we're closing down Main Street, this is from the business owners, too much, and we are not doing the best job of giving notice, and we are kind of lax in enforcing the setup time. Sometimes they say they're gonna set up at 5 and they set up at 3 o'clock, and then people get irritated. So those are the kinds of things that I hope are going to be fleshed out with a lot of people, including maybe the downtown people, giving input before this is finalized.
Sure, so I think once we have a first draft of the ordinance that sets forth at least the basic policy decisions,
Yeah.
that would be the opportunity for other parties to weigh in
Okay.
and help shape those, I don't want to say they're controversial components, but the more controversial pieces to make sure that the end product that does come to you all for a vote is more reflective of the general need.
Okay.
But I think along the way, we can, we can reach out to Lori and her team and see what input they have. And then we can also bring this back to you all in the same discussion format to talk about the various components before we actually bring the ordinance back.
Yeah.
If that would be more helpful.
Yep.
So,
Thank you.
yep. Okay, so kind of jumping over to the requirement section. So like I said, we're kind of, it's kind of loose. So it's essentially, we're building the skeleton and just trying to build the body from here. So some of the things that we've talked about is establishing an application window. And what that means is it would set a period of time, whereas essentially the earliest you could submit your application for an event, and the latest that you could submit the application. So you don't have someone in January trying to schedule it for December, just creating a kind of a closer window when you can really get a better sense of what's going on in the community and that sort of thing. The timeline that was discussed was 30 to 90 days. So there are some events where you may need a little bit more time for planning purposes, but basically what you don't want is someone coming in 7 days before, 10 days before, and that would be a strict requirement that you have to apply during that window. And I say strict, that's up to you all. That's not real yet, but that is kind of the idea. The next requirement, I've kind of designated it event representative. There's been a question of, as the applicant, do they have to physically be here for the council meetings? Or do they just have to have an event contact, so someone who during the event is on site and can be contacted if something is needed of them? We've discussed adding the requirement that if you apply for an event, you or your designee does have to attend the meeting to answer questions by the council. And the idea is if they're not in attendance, then they're not meeting the requirements of the ordinance, and so that could be an opportunity to maybe reject or push it to the next meeting, allow them opportunity. But it would also, I think, encourage communication that if they can't be here for the meeting where they're slated, they could communicate that a little more clearly. So hopefully that's responsive to some of your all's questions, but it is good to have somebody actually physically here. The next item, street closures. So many of our roads that these events impact are actually state right-of-way. It's not city right-of-way. So an element of the requirements here would be getting permission from the state through an encroachment permit to fully close or close a portion of the state right-of-way. We can also look at, from a traffic and safety standpoint, limiting closures to 1 lane instead of 2 lanes. We have opportunities to kind of impact how those closures occur and where. The next component, the predetermined routes, this has been one of the hot items, I would say. So I do have Chief Allgood here if you do have questions about this component, but I'm gonna just run through a brief. This is what we currently have, and then we can talk about that a little bit more. So currently, there are 3 standard routes, and they're more for 5Ks, but I'm just gonna call them the standard routes. And then the police department, I believe, does have at least 1 or maybe 2 alternate routes that they can pull in. So those are small, medium, and large. The small route, I understand, that's for events, participants up to 100, 125 people. And I believe this is the park out Cincinnati Road. And I'm sorry, I cannot think of the name of the park.
Rookie.
Yes, thank you. So that is the small park. So that is in the park. That doesn't really impact our streets. The medium route, this is 126 to 300 participants, and this is essentially South Hamilton, Mulberry, and Jackson, if you can picture that. And then the large route is South Hamilton, Old Lemons Mill, Military, Jackson, College, and East Main, and that's for events that are over 300 people. That's kind of just a general setup, and is a guiding, it's an opportunity for applicants to kind of know where in town my event may have to go, or routes that would work for the number of participants they're expecting. We do have events like Festival of the Horse that are right on Main Street proper and cut down access there. That's not part of the standard route, but hopefully in this section talking about predetermined routes, that's where we can outline and put people on notice of, hey, depending on the type of event, this is where in town you will go, right? Chief Allgood and his team are working with John's Run Walk Shop out of Lexington to kind of develop alternate routes. So depending on what you all as a body decide to do, you may want to eliminate one of the routes that exist right now. You may want to create new routes, that sort of thing. Just trying to get ahead on that so we have some options. Chief, anything on that? Okay, all right. Let me finish this and then we'll take questions on the route. So currently, technically, with each route, there is a component that the event applicants, particularly when police services are needed to support their events, they are supposed to be paying a fee essentially that covers the overtime for our police officers, and that, from my understanding, is not collected either consistently or at all. There's it can mix between them having a sufficient number of volunteers, but a lot of times the event require more attention than what a volunteer can offer. So that is something we're hoping to clean up in all of this. I'll discuss separately, but just wanted to bring your attention to that under this route conversation. Any questions on that?
Emily, if I can, as far as event representatives, we've had events that have come before this council and people weren't here. They said, nope. And, there was no rhyme or reason. There was an event that was turned down because they didn't have a representative here. We've had other events that have shown up and no one shows up and they go ahead and vote for it. So there's no, that's one reason for the event representative being here. As far as the predetermined routes for the 5K, we closed Main Street enough. The 5Ks need to stay off Main Street. That was my recommendation because it's an unnecessary thing that they're running out on Main Street. Well, we want to run on Main Street. Well, I'm sorry. Scoot over to College Street. So, and as far as notices, one thing that we could do, just like what the college has, and you were signed up for it, is the rave app. So notification that city could sign up for and get other people to sign up and send out notices that way. So, that may be something to alert people in the downtown area or whatever that, may have a street closure as well, or an email, whatever we want, however we want to do that, so.
So are you gonna finish this section, or?
I mean, I can keep rolling. I can just finish this slide and then we can talk more generally.
I had a question about the insurance, I was waiting
Okay,
on that.
let me finish. I just got a few more
Okay.
points. Insurance, indemnification, and the security plan. So under the current application, there already are requirements that we have for insurance and indemnification. We are opening up city property to the public, and so we do want to mitigate risk and just make sure that we have coverage there, just in the worst case scenario. So with that, this ordinance would set out more clearly what those insurance requirements are, and that could shift based on the size of the event, if there's alcohol involved, all sorts of things. The indemnification, that's essentially an agreement between the applicant and the city that, if someone does get hurt in one of these events, the event as the event applicant as the host of the event assumes responsibility for those versus the city who, we're granting them permission to use our property, but we're not really putting on the event. And then as far as the security plan, this kind of ties in with what I was talking about, how we do have police that work overtime and help, and even public works and that sort of thing. And even fire, I think, could be pulled into some of these events just depending on what's going on. Part of this would be creating an expectation that an applicant would provide some type of security plan just to show that they're thinking through the event fully from beginning to end and what kind of services they may need in that sense. So on the notices, the neighborhood communication, again, this is the requirement that not only would they have to submit, as we've discussed, kind of their marketing plan leading up to the event, but also what their plan is to communicate to the business owners and either the property owners, if it's residential, or I guess whoever is in the vicinity, their plan to communicate about their event, and also like a follow-up on that to make sure that they actually did send something. You see notices a lot where they're mailed out with planning and zoning matters. You receive a letter in the mail that on this date, this is going to happen. If you want, show up and talk. It doesn't have to be something like that, but it could be. It's just that extra layer to make sure that the event applicants are making that intentional effort to communicate with the people that are going to be impacted by the event. And then finally, a deposit for city services. So oftentimes what you'll see, cities will essentially, I don't want to get it confused with the permit fee. What we've discussed here, so the different city services that come into play or could come into play, so police, public works, fire. So this is at the event, not Tracy's office leading up or through the application process. It costs money for the city to staff these events and to provide equipment, so the trash cans, public works going around, taping off or marking off the area, that sort of thing. What's been discussed is that as part of the application, the applicant would need to submit a deposit, and the dollar amount that was picked, and this is not final, but a $500 deposit. And based on the services that are utilized for the event, that deposit money could be pulled from that to cover the services that were consumed essentially during the event, and then the remainder would be returned to them. If it's an event where they didn't actually use city services, they would get the full refund, or maybe it's an event where something got out of hand and, a few more people had to step up. Maybe it was really messy, or maybe property got damaged. The full deposit could be given to the city, and they may be charged more. That's also where the insurance would come into play if there was property damage, that sort of thing. So just trying to think through how, from beginning to end, we can recover the time that staff is putting into these events, and also protecting the property and the equipment that we're also lending. So that's generally kind of the big things that have been discussed. The other component of this that I didn't list on the slide, the whole purpose of this ordinance and setting forth these requirements is essentially that it's to ensure that only complete applications make its way to you all. So if anyone's missing a component, that should be taken care of, like, that shouldn't get to you all. You shouldn't have to worry about missing pieces. It should be a full application that you all can, you know, in good faith, review and approve and hope that everything's fine. I think that's all that I had. The only thing that I did not mention is just because of the nature of this, we are looking at Chapter 38, Traffic and Vehicles, being the section of the Code of Ordinances that this would fall under. It makes sense with the streets and police services that are kind of involved in this. So that's all I have on this slide.
Emily, on the deposit for city services, could it be structured to where the deposit required is based on the number of people you think you're going to have? What I'm afraid of is if, like the last instance you gave, is if the event requires more than what the deposit covers, just making sure that we have enough deposit there to cover it so we don't have to go back to them, because I'm afraid that, you know, some of them may not honor, you know, their commitment. So I would, you know, just to explore the possibilities of having a different rate structure for the size of your event.
Okay.
So my question was on the insurance, and if they don't have insurance, you're saying it won't come to council?
If you set
Yes, it
forth
really
in the,
won't.
Shouldn't.
if you set it forth as a requirement in the
Okay.
ordinance and also just best practices as an organization, if you require insurance, as you should in this situation, the liability in a lot of this is very high. If it's set forth as a requirement, you should respect that requirement and not accept applications that don't meet that. There's different types of insurance that's out there. And fortunately for us, not a lot of cities have this, but we do have a risk manager. And I'm sure he would be more than willing to help us come up with the different types of insurance that we would need based on the event or the size. But also we could work with him to create, and this is off topic, but a waiver or modification policy that could be used as appropriate. And that's kind of how we could navigate that depending on, I understand you may have a very small nonprofit organization, but every entity out there, I'm confident, can get insurance of some kind.
The other thing on the neighborhood communication, if we could think of some ways to help with that, such as the electronic signs, make that available to rent. And that would help the organization say, okay, here's some options that they have that they can choose to use for their communications on the electronic sign. Because I know it would take time to get that placed and get, you know, the verbiage on there, get that placed, and taking that down. So that should be a rental fee. And then I don't know where this fits. I would like to see in our council packets a 3-month event schedule so that we know what's going on. As we're getting these events, we can look at it and see how many events are stacking up, and it help us to make good decisions. So just a suggestion there.
I think I'll take note of that, and I think we can work that into the administrative process. That's a detail that wouldn't really be reflected in the ordinance because that's more inward, but we'll make note of that.
Emily, as part of, and we talked about this in our committee meeting, as to notices, I believe one of the requirements is that whoever the applicant is supposed to have some plan of how they're going to communicate their event to the people that's affected. That's correct?
That is something that's been discussed, and the expectation that's been discussed so far would be and the level of detail there would depend on the event and what's going on, but the expectation would be some type of plan that has details in it to show, you know, on these dates, so like in the 2 weeks leading up, for example, on these dates, here's what I'm going to do. So maybe it's 2 weeks out, I go around and knock on the door and say, hey, on this date, you know, we've applied and we're planning to, I don't know, you can fill in the gaps. I don't want to dream up a scenario, but it could be that level of detail where they're actually going and talking to the property owners, or it could be more just mail distribution, and then from there kind of pulling it back up to just general community marketing about the event in general. And then with that plan, you know, something we haven't talked about, but ideally with this new application window that we have and these new requirements that are being built in, as these things are coming to you, if people are reading the packets, they could see that, and if they have concerns, they could also show up to talk about the event. And maybe 2 weeks isn't enough notice for some people, depending on the event and the scale. So there's just things that you all will need to think through from a policy perspective.
One of the things that in the creation of this was, instead of having so many events on Main Street, push them to the city parking lot, push them to the county park or
Yep.
Brooking Park or wherever, but, you know, try to eliminate, shutting down Main Street so much, you know, even going so far as maybe even talking with the school system. There's a great big yard in front of Garth Elementary, or even once the Columbia Gas cleans up down there at Clayton and Broadway, that piece of property there that could be used for whatever case may be. So, you know.
Just a comment. I understand the need to have whoever is wanting to have the event contact and put out, bulletins and contact businesses. Let's say it's on Main Street. But it seems to me like the city, since we are approving it, should actually send out an official notice and not just depend on the event planner to do it. I think
That way you know that it's gonna be done.
exactly. I don't know. That's just my
That could be
sensibility.
part of that deposit and the money that we receive, not just the permit fee, but the deposit. We could utilize that to send out those notices. And then that way we know that the notices are sent out for that communication that we want to get
Yeah.
to the residents.
Would that be also, like, for instance, put it on your website
Yeah.
or something of that nature? To let them know that this event's going on, or
I think that
a-
should be done for sure,
a
but
calendar event, that,
Yeah.
here are the city approved events that's going on for the next month, or the next 2 months, or the next 3 months, whatever. Here are the dates, and this is sort of.
But I think we could specifically, we don't have all that many businesses that would need to be, we can do it electronically through a text feature, or we could send them an email or something.
The
But
residences?
the what?
I didn't hear.
The
what-
businesses
Yes.
on Main Street.
Yes.
Because they're the ones who are impacted financially when we have these things.
Well, to that point, I know there's discussion, especially with what Todd's been recommending. Essentially Todd's position, I hope I don't say this wrong, is that no events are going to be sanctioned on Main Street unless they're civic-sponsored events. So everything else should go to a different location. You only shut down Main Street for city or civic-sponsored events, so the tourism things.
I hope that's the way we
And
go.
if that's the intent, if we're actually a sponsor, or if government in general is a sponsor of those events, that does make perfect sense. Taking on the onus to notify impacted, if the ordinance establishes a radius, for example, you are required to give out notice to anybody within an X feet radius of the event. I think that might be a little tougher on the city, and I think you would definitely have to consider what kind of person power that's going to require and how that impacts your fee. And I think you almost need to make it kind of it could be an option to make it select if you
City-sponsored.
want the city to complete this for you, but there's going to be a fee, as with all these other things. But
That's a good
I think
idea.
that'll take care of itself with the Main
Yeah.
Street events, because
Yeah,
they
you
are
can,
going to be
you know,
civic sponsored.
Say, if you
That's a
go,
good idea.
if you really want Main Street, you're gonna have to pay this. However, it's not near, if you go to the city parking lot, or if you select another site, that the cost would not be near because we wouldn't have to have near, as much with Public Works and with the police department, fire department, whatever the case may be, as shutting down Main Street, so.
I kind of like what Devin said in the first place, and what we were on that,
Yeah.
like the civic events that are downtown on Main Street, and then otherwise no one else can.
Yep.
And then there'll be designated areas for those other events that want to happen.
Yeah, I think
And we
that
can
would work.
figure those out.
Mhm.
That's a good idea. That
Yep.
just eliminates anybody wanting to be downtown.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions or any more discussion you all want to have with each other kind of on this proposed process? So again, what we'll do is we'll put it into an ordinance form so you can see what this would look like, but we just wanted to make sure we had input, and then that will also help us find gaps that still need to be answered along the way. Yes.
Mr.
Council-
Showalter? Wow, that's all I can say. Several questions, and I want to make one or two comments. So just to perfectly understand this, I know we're just having a discussion right now. But if this ultimately passes, is it going to specify in that ordinance that, as Mr. Stone has stated, which we have a little disagreement of opinion here, that we're not going to shut down Main Street unless it's the Festival of the Horse or the concert on the square, those type of events, that it would clearly state, if that's the choice of this council, that City Hall or Main Street shut down?
So
I mean, is that what I'm hearing?
the ordinance could say that. The ordinance could be drafted in a way that you designate, so if it is city-sponsored or civic events like that, you could carve out events like that from that restriction. Does that make sense?
Right.
So you could say, for example, if this is something the council agreed on, you know, events of whatever size or whatever type of event will not be held on Main Street, except for event 1, event 2, event 3, which are city-sponsored or those big civic events. It could say that. It could be no events on Main Street. The other thing you need to remember is we're building in a kind of permit condition process too. So whatever the ordinance says, there could be events that maybe have a need or a reason to sway from the requirements, and you could impose conditions on those events. So if you didn't want to outright limit Main Street, you could, on each of these events that impact Main Street or request Main Street, you could impose conditions on those. So again, events on Main Street can only use one lane, like full Main Street can't be closed, but maybe one side, or Main Street can only be closed during this time of the day, that sort of thing. So the ordinance will dictate the general spirit, and then you would have some flexibility to set the policy and to give you the ability to set conditions.
So if you're a downtown business, whether you're a jewelry store, a bar, a restaurant, an antique store that depend on foot traffic, we're basically going to say, we're not shutting Main Street down. Basically what we're saying. Unless it's the Festival of the Horse, concert on the square, or if it's a parade on 4th of July or Christmas. Those are the only events we're shutting Main Street down for.
Well,
That's
just
why
to
we're
tag
having
on to
this-
what.
Well, no,
yeah,
I know we're having a discussion right now. I get
Yeah.
that. But hearing some of the comments I've heard, I mean, that's something we got to think about.
Well, I think the only reason why it's being brought up a lot is from the last few that we've had, is that according to the downtown merchants, they're the ones that are complaining about Main Street
Absolutely.
being shut down. So
Okay.
in essence of all of that, they're all different. Like a bar would be glad for that, but the jewelry store is going to shut down at 5. So, I mean, there's got to be a happy medium there, but I get what you're saying.
So the only other comment I have is, and there were quite a few of us here that were here when we changed the garbage pickup back in 2022.
Something like that.
And we saw what happened. And without proper communication,
Yeah.
we all know what happened. We still get those complaints today. So if we're truly going to look at making a change, and I'm eagerly awaiting, I know we might not get that response tonight, I think we should, from Trey, our city clerk. I mean, I thought that was a relevant question, that if this helps her and streamlines her being able to do other things, you know, I'm open for it, but I think if we're going to take this step, these are some big changes.
Changes.
We better do an excellent job of communicating, because I'm not going to be here, but there's going to be people in front of this council that don't understand what's going on. And the next council and Mayor, you are gonna have to deal with those type of challenges. So I'm not against it, but I think if we're gonna go this route, we gotta do an excellent job of communicating to the public.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's gonna happen.
I think this is why we're having this discussion.
Right. Yeah.
And I'll let
You're
you go
right.
this minute, ma'am.
That's fine.
And this discussion is this, to talk about things like this, to see where we are, in having this discussion. And, our city clerk, someone says, yes, she would have, she can get that to Emily and everybody know what she's thinking on that. And then feeling what she thinks best works for her, because she's the front line of this, where it begins. And she's gotta make sure everything's on that restrictions or requirements are met before it gets to us. So, and I agree, her input is very valuable, and we'll get that with her, and she can also put that along with that at that time, and get that going.
And
Okay?
I will clarify, Tracy has been at some of the police committees to talk about this, so she has weighed in on this, at least theoretically, and then if there are additional things that come up or as we work through this, we'll definitely address those, but I did want to clarify, she has weighed in on this. It's not the first time she's hearing it, so.
Okay, I think, Ms.
This
Conway?
may not be the exact time to say this, and you all can correct me and tell me that it should be during council comments, but it all kind of feeds into this. Whether or not, I'm just speaking about events, whether or not they're right down the center of Main Street, but it affects, like I walked into Save-A-Lot on Saturday, and their entire parking lot, and I have many pictures, was full, and I couldn't shop. And I went through it 4 times for somebody to walk, to pull out that was shopping, because they were using their parking lot to park for the Festival of the Horse to attend that. It's not just the Festival of the Horse I'm talking about. If there's events that are on Main Street or close to Main Street, and people are going to impact people's businesses, they were very, very, very upset, because they couldn't sell their groceries to the customers because people were parking and going downtown for 3 or 4 hours and riding rides and buying food and there for that event. So this is what I keep hearing in the last week or so. We have to have, because I think it's all tying in, Mayor, with the same thing, we have to have a parking structure. A 2 or 3 level parking structure that handles employees of the places that are on Main Street. So they've got a place to park their car, so when the customers come, they've got a place to get out and do business with these people. It's impacting their businesses. And we don't want to push people away because they circle and circle and circle and they want to buy something and there's no place to park. And it's going to help our, the building, the pavilion, the city hall employees, when all of it gets fixed. Now, granted, all these places are being worked on at the same time, which is an issue and a problem for parking. But we're growing by leaps and bounds, and we need a permanent parking structure to help the people coming into Georgetown and the people that work in Georgetown. And I've heard this many, many, many times. Now, if we own property that I don't know about, and I may not, that could be used by the city to help this situation, that's something I think we need to look into. Or if we have to purchase a piece of property for that.
Sure.
But it's not exactly what you're talking about, but it is affected by what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
The events.
And I think part of the reasoning with the security plan and just some of the different things we're talking about, parking is a big component of the event, so that is something that should be addressed ideally as part of the plan. And then that's one of the reasons too why they do work with the police on their coordinating the traffic. I will say generally, just while we're on this topic, the parking solutions that we have downtown and the private parking and the impacts on that, that is a private property issue, and that would be up to that property owner to call the police if they have cars parking.
They were in the parking lot telling people to please go on, but it didn't work.
I don't want to say it's an entirely solvable problem. These things will persist, but it's part of the conversation. So thank you for vocalizing that. I've made a note.
Wanted to bring that up. I don't know if it's the proper time, but
absolutely.
it seemed like it was.
I have one more comment.
Yeah.
I think what Mark is talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to speak to you, but we need a lot of upfront input from entities. And it would be, I mean, not only from Tracy, but, and we have been talking about a lot of these things with Robert Bruin and police, but, you know, maybe we need to survey the business owners. You know, if you're only hearing from 4 or 5 of them, maybe we need, you know, maybe we've got the wrong idea. Maybe they're getting more out of pedestrian traffic than it's a negative.
Well,
So I don't
just
know
want-
if we can.
I just want to say this, Willow.
Yeah.
I was down there Saturday night. You could not hardly walk, coming or going. And, I mean, the foot traffic was unreal, and people were busy.
Yeah.
Every restaurant was busy.
Yeah.
There was everywhere.
And that's why I'm saying the other corollary to this then, because I do feel like some of these events could be a big positive to
Yeah,
business,
absolutely.
is, again, if we give one per month, that would leave some openings. I mean, I'm talking about Main Street now. That would leave some openings for other things to take place on Main Street that are not necessarily community-sponsored. So that's just another idea to think about and put in the mix.
So I think with that, so what I'm hearing, so in addition to the input from tourism and the city departments that are impacted, you would be interested in, as a council, you'd be interested in some type of communication, outward communication, a survey, or some type of just public input process.
I would be.
So think about, so as we kind of shape this, and this would be through Mayor Jenkins assigning this to staff to put together, but think about the targeted area for that. So right now, you know, we're talking about maybe looking at some alternate routes that may be created. So the footprint, right now, we're talking about downtown Main Street, but there is a larger, there's a larger conversation happening here that's not just downtown. So just kind of keep that in mind. And that if that's something that you all would like to see, you know, please direct that to Mayor Jenkins, and then we can build that into this process before we put together the ordinance to bring forth to you all.
And one thing with the 5Ks, and I've seen it in the past because I've worked them, but is most all of them occur over, they start on either in the circle at the college or on Memorial Drive, and they go out. And especially on the weekends, you know, you got college students coming and going and amongst those, and you know, that's something else that we need to try and consider with the 5Ks is the impact of the college students coming and going. And so, something else that we need to look at as well.
Okay, I've got that noted. Any other questions or comments on this slide? If not, please direct your questions to Mayor Jenkins, so he can share those with us, and we can just consider this as this process moves forward. If not, I'm going to move to the next slide. Okay. So one of the components, what other amendments are going to be needed? So on the last slide, I talked about that Chapter 38 was the section of the code that we were looking at. This would be creating a new ordinance. Like I said, there's not a standalone special events ordinance on the books right now. So I did go through the code of ordinance and tried to find what are the sections that we have that speak to special events, or at least kind of like cover this area. And those are these 3 sections. So section 2835, this falls within chapter 28 of the code, which covers noise regulations. Currently under this section, permitted activities, they must comply with noise conditions that are placed on their event. Whether or not those are being imposed, that's an event by event decision, but this section would need to be amended because the proposed ordinance would be addressing that. So we're trying to clean that up so there's no inconsistencies. Section 3820 and 38135, this already falls under the traffic chapter. 3820 regarding parades and processions, it defines what those are, and it limits those events to ones that have a special event permit. So in order to have a parade or some type of procession, currently they do have to come to you all for permission. Again, this is just making sure we have consistency in the new process. And then the last one, section 38-135. This is in what's called the stopping, standing, and parking section of Chapter 38, specifically geared towards municipal parking lots. So currently, the commercial use of city parking lots is prohibited, and commercial use means basically it's something that supports the generation of revenue. You cannot do that unless you have a special event permit. So, you know, at the festival, vendors set up, they're making money from their sales. That's a commercial use, but they're able to be there because there's a special event permit for that event. Otherwise, that's a violation of the local ordinance. So I just wanted to point those out to you, that not only are we creating a new chapter or a new section, but there are some amendments just to clean it up. There could be others sprinkled throughout, but these were the ones that I specifically found. Any questions on that? Okay, and then last, just kind of next steps. So as we talked about, there are a lot of policy level decisions that need to be decided. We talked about fees, we talked about routes, we talked about communication, insurance, all sorts. I have more notes here, I won't go back through them. But before we can even proceed with this, we do need to try to come to a consensus on at least what that baseline first draft is going to look like. From there, you know, we could present a draft ordinance for review, kind of like we're doing tonight, which is just a discussion. We could add extra layers for public input to get more community involvement in this process. Once we have a draft ordinance that is in really good shape, essentially, if it's not perfect, it's near perfect, we could then look at the first reading, where you could have additional discussion. You know, maybe there's some last minute changes, that sort of thing. And then ultimately it would lead to the second reading, which you would then vote to approve or reject the ordinance as it's presented to you all. And then from there it would go into effect like our ordinances usually do. So just want to kind of put you on notice, I guess, of what we're looking at. One of the questions that Council Member Hambrick had last time was like, when? When are we going to see this? It depends. Kind of just depends on how fast all this comes together. It depends how much time we want to afford for that input and review process. It is September, so if we want to get it done by the end of the year, we only have a handful of council meetings left. So thank you. You're our official countdown council member. So 6 meetings left. So if this is, I mean, just think through it. It's a lofty goal, but it could be done before the end of the year. We don't want to rush it.
No, let's not rush it.
It is a big thing.
It's a big thing.
But just kind of keep that in mind. And with that, I am done, unless you have more questions.
We can always email the mayor with more stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
All right.
And I encourage you to do that, you know, especially if you have questions that, you know, that you think of or an idea. Just flow this way, and I will get it in part of the discussion. And I know when we have our police committee meetings and so on, we can bring it out and have further discussion, and we'll get this all collectively together.
Quick to that.
Yes, ma'am.
Emily's done a really good job speaking internally with other staff members, police, public works, anybody essentially who could be impacted by the process. Obviously, Tracy has an integral part of the process, so she's done a really good job of that. But like mentioned, the goal is to get that policy feedback from you all. So I know Mark mentioned, Willa mentioned, Todd, different options for how often Main Street might be closed, and maybe some of that public engagement with the impacted business owners could kind of dictate where that goes. But any policy feedback is really what we were going for. So I feel like this was a good discussion, and want to thank you all for that.
Thank you, Emily.
Appreciate it. Okay, next, we're going to switch back to item B, the resolution, FFA grant funding for the airport board.
So we've accepted a couple of these in the past. Some of you might recall, but the airport board is the grantee under this funding, but the FAA requires that the local governments that serve in that jurisdiction and appoint the board serve as co-sponsors. And so it requires that the mayor and Emily as council sign this agreement in order for them to receive those funds. So it looks like $880,000 and change for noise program implementations. We do have a copy of their grant agreement. We can send it to you once it's executed if that's something you're interested in, but this is a formality that's required of the mayor and judge in order for the airport board to accept the funding.
Motion, Mayor.
Motion is made by Mr. Allen. Do I have a second? Second made by Mr. Hampton. Are there further questions and/or comments? All those in favor of the resolution for FFA grant funding for the airport board signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say likewise. Let the record reflect that the motion passed. Next, we're down to item number 11, the Police Department. A, resolution accepting the Kentucky Office of Highway Safety Grant.
Okay, this one is accepting a grant in the amount of $6,500 from the Kentucky Office of Highway Safety for traffic safety activities.
Council, if you've been around for any number of years, we've been getting this funding, I can't even tell you how long. It's a pretty insignificant amount of funding, but allows for some overtime details that can help on the safety front, and Sergeant Perkins heads this program up.
Motion.
Motion made by Ms. Tackett.
I'll second.
Second made by Mr. Cohen.
Doesn't matter.
You win. Ms. Conway is second. Are there further questions and/or comments? All those in favor of the motion, resolution accepting the Kentucky Office of Highway Safety Grant signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say likewise. Let the record reflect that the motion passed. Next is B, resolution authorizing application for Violence Against Women's Act VAWA grant.
Okay, so the VAWA application that's being submitted by Friday is for a recurring program. The grant request is for $94,645. And there is a 25% match requirement that I think is already covered in the budget in the amount of $23,661.
Motion.
Motion made by Ms. Hamrick and
Second.
second made by Ms. Tackett. Are there further questions and/or comments? All those in favor of the resolution authorizing application for Violence Against Women Act VAWA grant signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say likewise. Let the record reflect that the motion passed. Item C, municipal order surplus property.
Motion. It's
Okay.
the,
He's got to read.
oh, he's got to read it.
Chief.
No, you don't have to read a municipal order.
But Chief, you want to come up and tell us a little bit about this
I
surplus?
just know a little bit about it.
Okay.
So we have 7 Cannondale mountain bikes, 2 Fuji mountain bikes, and 2 Raleigh mountain bikes. These bikes are over 20 years old. We got these from Lexington a long time ago, so we were wanting to put these up for surplus, mainly because their parts are hard to find and it's just not economical to fix them when they're needed. Our goal is to use or purchase some e-bikes from the new Georgetown bike store that's opened up downtown across from Galvin's. And we used those. We used one at the Festival of Horse over the weekend. We found it was very beneficial, especially we kept going down to the carnival, so up and down hills. If the officers need to get back up on Main Street, they could click it into the electric part. Of course, they get back up the hill a lot easier. Also with keeping pedestrians back during the parades, Officer Johnson was able to go from one end of Main to the other rather quickly. I think the one that he was testing can go 30 miles per hour, so that's our goal, is to reach out and hopefully get 2 of those and get our bike fleet up to where it needs to be.
Motion, Mayor.
Motion made by Mr. Stone. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second made by Ms. Brent. Are there further questions and/or comments?
I want to say I seen his presence down there on Saturday. Pretty cool.
Thank you.
Any more comments or questions? All those in favor of the municipal order for surplus property for the bikes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say likewise. All righty, now it's time for council comments. I'm going to start with you, Ms. Brent.
don't have anything to say, but I just want to thank everyone that put together the Festival of Horse this weekend. And thank you all for letting me have the carriage all to myself. I appreciate that. I enjoyed riding the carriage and waving to the youngsters and everything, but no, I appreciate Public Works, Police, Fire, everyone that was involved with that. Thank you.
Ms. Hamburg?
Thank you, Emily. That was a lot. And I think it deserves a lot more discussion, but I appreciate you getting the ball rolling, and that was well presented. I've had 2 people this week, and I think we've mentioned it before, ask about the impact of the impact fees. So if we could get a follow-up on that at some point, how that is, you know, is it generative? Is it?
On the 23rd, which is the next meeting, the group's going to come in and talk about that.
Okay, good. All right, I'll write them an email and tell them that then. Thoughts and concern for our police officers in the state and the people who were injured in the I-75 shooting. It's a very sad situation, and just hope against hope that we don't have to get involved in that, but you never know. But there are people who are in danger right now, and just on the record that our council is concerned and praying for them. Also, I think that it's really good that we're having somebody come from Frankfurt to talk about aspects of the possibility of this regional configuration for the Wiles property. And I really want to hear them talk about why the state is so, is feeling like this is such an important way to do investment in business. I think it's a really great idea to bring them in, and I appreciate the initiative that it took to get that going, so thank you. That's it, Mayor.
Mr. Hampton?
Just a couple of things. First of all, want to give kudos and big thank you to all the Festival of the Horse organizers. It was really great opportunity this weekend to get out and see people. And the last thing, Chief Thompson, congratulations to all your pinnings tonight. That well deserved, and you have a bunch of fine young men and women there. So thank you.
Mr. Showalter?
Yeah, Mrs. Hambrick beat me to the punch on the developer impact fee, so no, we've waited a long time. No, I apologize. I don't mean that in a negative way, but I'm looking forward to that discussion. Second item is if we're going to survey the downtown business owners about a potential change to our, in this case, a special events ordinance, I think while we're talking to those business owners, I think we also need to ask them what their thoughts are on the parking situation downtown during business hours, Monday through Friday. It's not just about shutting Main Street down, it's about what kind of impact does this have on your business when people park in one spot all day and don't move their car? And we all know it's an issue. So, thank you.
All right, Mr. Stone?
Thank you, sir. Mark, I appreciate your views on that. And earlier during the presentation, these are just ideas and things that I've heard from for years, not only as a council member, but as a police officer as well, about the different aspect of different events going on downtown. So, just trying to bring a little extra point to that. So, by no means, trying to push one thing or another. We do need to input in the conversation and at least have like when we first had the meeting in your office, a jumping off point. By no means is anything up there set in stone and locked in. So hopefully everyone will bring some input into that, and we can make it fair for everyone, not only the business owners, but the residents that live there and the ones that want to come to downtown Georgetown. So other than that, Chief, congratulations on your guys, well deserved, they worked hard to get there. And then everybody with the Festival of the Horse, that was a major undertaking, as it is every year, so, that's it.
Thank you. Mr. Allen?
Thank you, Mayor. Just, in terms of the special events ordinance, there is no rush on this. We just need to take our time and get it right. So whenever it happens, but communicating and getting input from the businesses is the right thing to do. Another thing was, there was an email circulated last week regarding conducting a crucial study on our housing needs and looking for input from a survey link. And just wondering if all city council members got that, who all that actually went to. So I had some concerns about it, but we just need to make sure that we are getting that out to the.
If you didn't get it, I think we,
Mayor, can I speak to
yeah,
that?
you can, I'll let you speak to it.
Yeah,
Go
that was
ahead.
only an employer survey, so the process is gonna incorporate a lot of different surveys, and we can get you an update on what those are, but that was only intended for employers, so that's why it kind of pushed through the Chamber of Commerce. But there will be other surveys as a part of or fact-finding surveys as a part of the larger scale survey.
And is that part of the housing needs, or part of the strategy?
It's part of the housing needs assessment that's being conducted by RKG and funded by the city, county, and Scott
And
United.
it would be good to see what that plan is, so we understand going forward. Here's the plan going forward. I know we're doing the housing need assessment, but in addition to that, what else are we doing? It's not clear. And that's all I have.
Ms. Tackett?
Just a few things, Mayor. First of all, congratulations, Tim. It's pretty exciting, really. I know change is always inevitable, people retire and stuff, but it looks like you got a great crew. So congratulations. It's got to be exciting, for sure. And then on the festival downtown, I just want to say the parking, I drove around downtown Saturday, and I was going through the back ways because I know how to do that because I've lived here all my life. So I'm going down the little alleys and stuff like that. Bourbon Street had parking on both sides, Bourbon Street. Then when you came out on North Hamilton, parking on both sides. People couldn't even get in and out. It was crazy. But I just knew how to get by and get out because I was going to a certain place. But they were everywhere, all down Washington, all the way down. Water Street, they were walking, everybody was walking everywhere. But I do want to say this about the parking. I know that we have a lot going on with the Justice Building, with City Hall, and the Pavilion. And it has put a crunch on us, but we still had a really good festival. They did a good job, the police department, Public Works, the fire department. It was great what they did. We got through it. So I want to commend everybody for that and just say that it was a good festival. And thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Ms. Conway?
It's almost gonna be ditto with that, but I'm saying the same thing about your employees that have been there a long time, taking over for the people that have retired. I know you're real proud of them, and I know several of them. The festival was great. I was there Friday with the mayor and Greg and Todd, and we started off, you'll find this humorous, on Millie climbing up the fire truck to the ladder, and it was dry and sunny. Everything was good. And one of the firemen was so nice, he came up and he said, "Let me stand up here with you, Miss Conway." And I said, "Okay, I'm ready to go." And then he kept looking at his phone and he going, "Oh, it's gonna rain. Oh, it's gonna rain. It's gonna rain a lot. Oh, Miss Conway, maybe you should get off this ladder and come on down the steps now while it's dry." And I said, "Probably a good idea." So I started walking and I was thrilled. There was a big turnout, all these people, all these kids, all these floats, all this great. So I'm walking thinking, I'm gonna either find Bernie and walk with him, or I'm gonna find somebody. So here's Roy Cornett in his 1959 green pickup truck with the tailgate down, and he was talking to Jim Calloway, and I said, "Can I hitch a ride on the back of your tailgate?" And he said, "Absolutely." So I sat, I know nobody knew who I was. I sat on the back just waving. I had no candy. I just waving and waving.
That's good.
Had the best time until, and I still had a good time because I don't care, till we turned the corner by the courthouse. And then it was whoosh, and I mean, I didn't have a dry spot on me. It was just, I was soaked, And he looked at me and he said, "Do you want to get inside the truck?" And I said, "Yeah, I will." So he stopped, I got in the truck, and he drove me home to my house up on West Main Street. Sat there and talked about how old the truck was, where he got it and all this. But, you know, I love the festival, and y'all, and I've been talking the whole time with my microphone off. And the whole time, I want y'all to realize something. I know y'all don't think I'm very old, but 41 years ago, when Patrick Duffy,
Oh, yes.
Bobby Ewing, I was in charge of part of the festival with the Chamber of Commerce with Margaret Johnson. And I got to meet him, and it is a lot of work. I mean, we measured off spots for all of the vendors and the food people to come and the crafts, and I had a ball. And to start that 41 years ago and be on the council 41 years later and still enjoying the Festival of Horse is quite a trip, you know? And I got one more thing to say. Mayor, could you please get whoever needs to know that we've got to get that street paved over that bridge, because I really do feel like, and I go slow, but I do feel like the Dukes of Hazzard going over the bumps. As we know,
I actually had somebody mention that to me the other day too.
it's kind of tough, you know, on the, I don't know how quick it can be done, but that would be the final thing to do to make that bridge and that entrance and everything perfect. So, thank you. That's
Well,
all.
Major, I forgot one thing.
Oh,
And
shoot.
it's a major thing. It's a big deal. Chief Alden, could you stand up?
Call it out.
I'm calling him out. I'm calling him, Assistant Chief Nash, and Captain Lowe. They have now completed the trilogy in the FBI National Academy.
Wow,
That is
congratulations.
Y'all don't realize, that doesn't happen.
How hard that is.
You get one, maybe two, but to have three people do that, that's huge. So I almost forgot that. I'm sorry,
That's
sir.
awesome.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Well, you know, I didn't get wet in the parade because I was at front. That's one thing about being the mayor. You get them at the front and you get done quick.
I know, but I wasn't at the front.
So with no further action or business for this council, this meeting is adjourned.